Now, the NDP has this motion. They point out that corporations should pay what they owe. Well, we agree with that. We think they say there should be increased penalties for price fixing. Well, we agree with that too. They think that the Agriculture Committee should study high food prices and whether there is something called greedflation, including by inviting grocery store CEOs to the committee. We agree with that too. That's all very reasonable. Unfortunately, in some ways it doesn't go far enough because they have a very limited view of greed. They think that it only exists in the private sector. They ignore, in this motion, government greed. Right? Government greed. It's almost, they have this fantastical view of human nature. It's actually not, I wouldn't say that it's optimistic or pessimistic. It's both at the same time. They think that a human being is an angel when they work for the state, but a demon when they work in the private sector, as though greed is a part of human nature only in the free market. But when that's the same person who works for a company then transmits over and works for a bureaucracy or as a politician, all of a sudden they are purified of all greed and transformed into an entirely different being. The reality is that human nature is what it is, for warts and all, good and bad. And the reality is that there is greed, and the greed exists in government as well. When the government expands itself vastly faster than the economy, increasing costs by $500 billion in the last 2 years alone, $200 billion of which had nothing to do whatsoever with COVID. When the government, against the warnings of the Conservatives, gave corporations wage subsidies even though they could afford to pay out dividends to their shareholders and bonuses to their executives, the government was engaging in feeding that greed. When the government printed $400 billion, causing inflation to spiral out of control to the benefit of the super rich who saw their assets inflate, but to the disadvantage of the poor, who then lost purchasing power and watched house prices go out of reach so that they could never get out of their parents' basements or out of that 400-square-foot apartment. That was government greed that had caused that transfer of wealth from the have-nots to the have-yots. So I just wish once in a while this party, the NDP, which believes in the endless expansion of the state, would for just once acknowledge the role that government greed has played in plaguing this country with the highest inflation in 40 years. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. $500 billion in new inflationary spending has bid up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest we pay. The inflationary taxes have bid up the cost for businesses and farmers to produce those goods. The more Liberals and Democrats spend, the more things cost. That's how we got into this mess in the first place. But the Liberals and the NDP, the costly coalition, want to double down on the problem by further increasing the costs on the backs of Canadians, by tripling the carbon tax, which will inevitably be passed on to consumers. You cannot tax farmers, truckers, and grocers without having those costs passed on to the people at the end of the grocery aisle. We know that they will pay those higher prices. We know they already have. Conservatives say enough. The time has come to cap government spending and cut government waste so that we can phase out the inflationary deficits and taxes, cancel the plan to triple the carbon tax, and instead deploy technology to make green alternative energy more affordable. Let's bring down the cost of energy rather than bringing it up. And speaking of which, let's remove the government gatekeepers that make this the 64th ranked country in the world when it comes to getting a building permit. 63 other countries give them faster. What does that mean? It means that farmers can put up their barns faster. It means that mines that would produce lithium, cobalt, copper, and other minerals for green electricity must wait longer and therefore cost more money. It means that producing clean, green, Canadian nuclear, etc., could be coming onto the market faster. Let's get these gatekeepers out of the way, speed up the production, unleash the mighty force of our free enterprise system so that instead of creating cash, we create more of what cash buys, that we unleash the production of a cleaner, more affordable economy for all of our hardworking people. Thank you.